This is the best internet I've had in Edinburgh. It looks like we're live. Hi, everybody. My name is Lori Beth, and this is episode number 51 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. For those of you who don't know me, I am a psychotherapist and a psychospiritual mentor, and I mentor and teach highly sensitive powerhouse women the somatic, therapeutic, and spiritual tools to stop being basically to resolve lifelong trauma and stop being a self-development project and be able to actually start enjoying who they are and living in their natural expression as they are now. So just wanted to give a little bit of an intro if you don't know me. And this is a show that I've been doing for over a year. And the impetus of me, like what prompted me to do this show and what it really is about is exploring what transformation is from the inside out. So not so much from, sometimes in the coaching industry, we think about transformation as like, you know, if I do this program or if I, you know, do this 10-week transformational program, then I'm gonna, you know, get the relationship that I want, or make more money, or, you know, have the business that I want, and that's going to bring happiness. And I'm interested in looking at like what brings that kind of happiness and well-being and peace from the inside out. And, you know, what are different people in different coaches and therapists and different thought leaders, what are they saying about this kind of transformation that I'm talking about? So with all that said, I'm really excited to be interviewing Blaire Lindsay. Thanks for being here, Blaire.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Lori. It's a great intro, by the way. As you were talking about what you did, I was like, yeah, really resonates. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm really excited to have you on the show because I've really resonated with your work. I feel like, you know, we have some overlaps in our work for sure. And you were actually one of the first people that I started following or was introduced to when I entered into the coaching industry. So it's exciting to have you. Have you here. And so I would love to. So the topic of today is, what is feminine power? And we'll go into that in a moment. I love this topic, by the way. It's like one of my favorite topics. And I've even had other people on the show who have been exploring this topic and from a completely different lens. And so it's just, which actually is part of what the topic is like, in my opinion, we get to define, each of us as women get to define what feminine power means to us. But we're going to be exploring it today from Blaire's vantage point, and also from, you know, just looking at different ways that like, how do we promote this kind of feminine power that is about women's choice and sovereignty. But before we get started, I would love to introduce Blaire for those of you who do not know her. She is, and I'm going to be looking at her bio because she said it better than I did. But I could probably say a lot anyway. She's a coach and she's a trauma resolution guide, and she has done, you've done the somatic experiencing training, right? So you have like,
I'm in the middle of it right now.
You're in the middle of it. Yeah. So you are, you know, a trauma informed coach and being trauma trained. And also, I know, providing a program for women that's teaching, you know, other female coaches more about trauma and how to work with trauma. Exactly. So I see you as a leader in that field in terms of bringing it into the coaching realm, which is really wonderful. And Blaire is, I mean, I know that I would say you work with embodiment and empowerment. And we're going to get into that in this talk. Like, what does that actually mean to be working with, you know, helping women to have deeper embodiment, and the gifts of that. And also, what does it truly mean to be a stand for women's empowerment? And let me see if there's anything else I would add. Yeah, just that I love that you say that you hold a powerful space for people to come into relationship with their body wisdom and their erotic, intelligent, and inherent worth. And it looks like also, that's great. You know, well, I also want to, and you've provided, what's the word that I'm looking for? You are the co-founder, and I know you founded it initially, of the summit of the shadow side of the feminine. I think I'm saying that right. Yeah. Which yeah, is a huge project and a hugely needed project. So that if for those of you who are new to Blaire, I would definitely, I think you have a page for that, right? I would definitely.
Yeah, the summit's no longer on. It's available for purchase, but it was really an incredible exploration. Wow.
Mhm.
I'm not the same person as the one who started that project.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the reasons I'm really excited to have you on the show, because I've been following you or known you. We did a course together, which was actually how we met. So we had like actual, yeah, we did a sales course together.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the things that's been so amazing to watch is I feel like I've watched your transformation as a coach since I knew you and have known you. And I think part of today's topic, right, is like, and you can speak to this, like both in terms of, I've seen you really become a leader, I think, in this work of what is the feminine, you know, and what are the different sides of the feminine. And so that's really like what we're addressing today, which is like, what is feminine power? And then putting on this summit, obviously. And then I think it seems like your work has shifted, you know, has shifted over time in a variety of ways, you know, both in your trauma orientation, and you could speak to it more, but, you know, and I mean, part of what we're going to be talking about today is, you know, Blaire being a leader and using her platform and her voice to speak about things that are important in the world, including politics, including inclusion of Black and brown bodies, including white privilege, so that, you know, that you're creating a space as a leader that really encompasses what you believe in and what you want to be a stand for. And so that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about. And that's a beautiful sort of, I've seen you blossom into that. And I think, you know, the other thing, the main, and the piece that we're really going to be talking about around this is, because I started with that. So let me see if I can back up and then we'll start. But is, you know, that there's this way that in the women's empowerment and embodiment field of the coaching industry, and I would say business at large, and, you know, in corporations and companies and all kinds of things, and all kinds of different places that women are working, but we're going to be probably focusing more on like sort of female entrepreneurs in the coaching field. There's been a real, there can be a real emphasis on this kind of like, you actually coined this, and I'll let you talk about it more, but what you said, somebody coined the feminine empowerment brand or female empowerment brand. Which one is it?
Yeah, I'd actually, that's Kelly Diels. Diels, Diels is her last name, but she coined this term, the feminine lifestyle empowerment brand, which as soon as I read everything that she's written about this and her view about that, I was like, oh, that's it. That's like, she's pointing her finger on this thing that I think a lot of women feel, but we haven't been able to quite vocalize. And I'd love to just dive right in.
Yeah, dive
kind
in.
of like go back to this question that you had about like, what is feminine power? And for me lately, it's really been, and it's changed, right? You said you've seen my journey throughout the last couple of years. So I've been in, I feel, so many different stages, but at this particular stage, I'm really looking at these ways in which the feminine and women in particular are essentialized. And by that, I mean the ways that basically there are like these boxes that we put, that maybe our culture puts around us, maybe our coworkers put around us, maybe we put around ourselves. And we say like, this is the box that I need to fit into to be happy, important, successful, make money. And I'm really at this point, like I feel this fire in my system. It's just like, I want to blow up these fucking boxes. And it's nuanced, right? Because like, maybe I'll go back to this thing about essentialization. I think one of the problems with the masculine feminine definition, especially when we go into like, you know, Tantra or people like John Gray, like men are from Mars, women are from Venus kind of stuff. It's like, well, the feminine is like the receptive, and it's the yin to the yang, and it's the, you know, the thing that receives, like symbolized by the womb. And all of that is like true and really important information in certain contexts. And for myself, and what I see is that we've taken these truths and kind of further like enclosed ourselves in these boxes, in a sense, right? Of like, well, then like my business should, like I should be super yin in my business, and I should be like really soft spoken, or I should be right, like, and maybe we're not saying those things to ourselves, but maybe that's the reflection or the feedback that we're getting. So some feedback that I got recently was like, I was posting stuff that like was kind of fiery. Like, I'm pissed off about a lot of things right now, and I think we have a right to be. There's a lot of things crumbling and newness emerging. I got this feedback that was like, can't you just go back to empowering women? Like, that fire is actually toxic and oppressive.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah,
and I was like,
shocking.
Like, talk about a box, right? Talk about like, yeah, I may be those things, yin and flowing and empowering to whatever this person perceives as empowering. But I'm also a whole person, right? And I'm also, I think, I can't speak for every woman, but like I speak for every woman, like we're not just yin, receptive, soft, flowing, feminine in this essentialist kind of way creatures. Like, we're also smart and powerful, and we have a lot of power. We have a lot of power. I think especially as white women, actually, we have a lot of power in the sense that, like, more than we realize, to do good in this world. And there's this just, I feel so many boxes put on us, and then those boxes which have been culturally imprinted and maybe imprinted from our families, they actually get imprinted in our nervous systems too. So that when I like go to post something that feels really important for me, but I'm going to get backlash, and people maybe are going to misunderstand me, like I go into collapse, or I go into freeze, or I don't have the ingrained tools to metabolize those experiences, right? So that's how these boxes really get ingrained in certain women. Like, I know this isn't true for all women probably, but it's my experience. And I just feel like right now I'm like, what is actually true for me beyond the tropes, beyond the binaries, beyond, and like those things can still be true. It can be true that like I can be in my feminine and be flowing, but that's not, we can't limit the feminine to just that. If we expect to be full embodied humans, sovereign agent humans.
Yeah, and I would even say with all of that it's like, I love that question, like, what is true for you? I guess that's how I would want to, that's how I support women, and I'm sure you do too, which is it seems like that's the way. is like there for one woman it may be that, yeah, like her power comes from like she's self-defining her power coming in a certain way. Maybe that is more yin, you know. For another woman, maybe it's like there's a fierceness, right? And why are we limiting? Why does that then get limited? Like, or even a penetration. Oh, that's masculine, you know, because you're being penetrating right now.
Yeah.
Why is it that they, I mean, that's something that I think about quite often. And I
Yeah.
also think about like, I mean, I have a fire under my butt when someone, because I've gotten this projection a lot, when someone will be like, well, if you were just more in your feminine, then blank, you know, then this would happen in your life, or this. And how I feel is like, first of all, I think about it as different. There's a range of qualities like you're talking about that we can embody all of them. And I'm all with you. I want to have more of a fullness in my being, be able to occupy all the different parts. But then I also think about it as I often have the response inside that's like, I might actually want to develop some of these qualities that you're thinking are like I don't have in me that might be like maybe are characterized as more feminine, but I want to do it because it actually feels real and true for me. Like it's going to add something to my life, and it feels like it's part of my path, not because like I have to be this way in order for you to feel safe or for you to feel like I fit into that box.
Right? For you to feel more comfortable, or for a
Yeah.
man to feel more comfortable. I think what you said is so important, so important. It's about range. And
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed Kendra Kunoff for the summit. She's amazing. I would really
Mm-hmm.
recommend everybody checking her out. But she talked about this kind of range within the feminine. So range implies that there's a kind of that there can be a fluidity, there's a variety, there's variance in the expression. So might it benefit me to
Mm-hmm.
go into that like flowing, soft, nurturing space? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if my range is maybe not oriented towards that. And is it kind of dangerous to limit ourselves to just that in how we show up and not cultivate the range that might be on the opposite side? I think there is.
Yeah. Well, and then I mean, so this is like I'm glad you started here because it feels like this is the like foundation of the conversation, and then there's these pieces that I see are like kind of on top of it that we, you know, that we both talked about previous to this call. And what this is about is like, what does it mean? What is, I think we titled this like, what is feminine power? In part because it's like maybe that could be one definition, even like you have range, right? Like, and you get to choose how you're being, but also that you have range. I think another definition, and this is what we started with, would be like you're using your voice, especially as a white woman, right? To like you're using your voice to get angry about things that are happening in the world. You're using your voice to be a more inclusive space, you know, to say what you believe, like to talk about systems of oppression and how you feel about them, both in order to create inclusion in your spaces, but also because that's what's important to you in the world and you want to, you know, use your platform for that. And I think that's the part that really struck me in our previous conversation was how much backlash you have gotten for that. And actually from women and men, and I'd love for you to speak about it, but also that like what a sexist response. I mean, I'm just going to say it as it is. To me, that's like quite a sexist, like the responses that you've gotten are quite sexist. Like they're quite, right. They're quite, in my opinion, it's like even that response I think was from a woman, right? Like, so a
Yeah.
woman saying like, I used to like how you were, but now I don't like it because, right, there's things in her own being she's not comfortable. I mean, this is, I think we can say this. It's a projection of I'm not comfortable what you're representing now.
Yeah.
So now I need to project onto you, you know, why you used to be more palatable, but now you're not, you know.
Totally. Oh, yeah. I mean, so first of all, yeah, I want to really go back to this, like, what is what is feminine power, because like you said, it's so deeply personal to each person, and all of our journeys are so personal. And that's kind of the beauty of the feminine in a sense as well, is that there's this non-linear path, this mysterious force that's guiding us towards our own like authentic power. And I see a lot of language and material that's, you know, yeah, feminine power, pussy power, like harness this power to, I often see it connected with money, like pussy power and like earning money, which I'm not knocking. Like, I'm not knocking that. I think it has its place, but I also have this place inside of myself that's like, but what do we do with that power? Like the power that we're cultivating through healing trauma. Like there's a huge amount of trauma that, or power rather, that comes back into our systems when we renegotiate trauma. And there's power when we step into more authentic places within ourselves. There's power when we recognize our erotic nature. Like that is life force, that is power. And what the fuck are we gonna do with it? Like, am I gonna buy like 10 Gucci bags and like, you know, portray them around like this is how I use my feminine power? Like maybe, and I'm saying it jokingly, but it kind of pisses me off because it goes back to Kelly Deal's idea of like the feminine empowerment lifestyle brand of like, this is what we need to, these are the markers of success as a woman. And this is what I should use my power for. I should use my power to have a nice body and be pretty and be thin and be rich and be wet and like these things. And there's also, to me, this like voice inside, and I'm not a social justice activist by any means, but I do have this voice that's like, what are we doing this for? And if we're not doing it to make the world a safer, better place for everyone, not just the people who look like me, not just the people who want to be like me, then I think we're really missing something important, because when we mobilize our power, there is so much there. And it's gonna, I really feel that people doing good in the world is gonna also be so particular and specific, right? Like for some people, it's gonna be like working with children. For some people, it's gonna be painting. For some people, it's gonna be like going out and protesting. I loved what David Bedrick, a former guest of yours, he like wrote a post about this, that we're gonna have a different path. But I think it's worth it, well worth it, as we reclaim our power, to really think long and hard about what we're serving with that power.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's really powerful also what you're saying, because I think also, well, yeah, and it reminds, it makes me think of so many things. Naomi Wolf wrote a book. Now I can't remember the name of the book. It was before
The Beauty Myth.
Yeah, The Beauty Myth. Yes.
Yeah.
It was exactly precisely about this, actually, of what you just shared, that like we're sort of trained to take that power that we have and put it into the diet industry, or the, you know, how we look. And it's actually a way of like, I mean, she was talking about it societally, obviously, but it's a way that then it's a way to keep women kind of down and not really truly in their power, and, you know, using their power for, like you're saying, so, I mean, what we call good, but using their power in a way that we could say is life-serving or generative. And I mean, that's the words I would use, you know, that is different for each woman. But also I would argue, I'd like go so far to say that I think that when we are doing something that's out of our self-interest, like meaning we're not moving from interest, even though of course we want to have our basic needs met and we want to feel good in the work, in our bodies and life. I think it also, our power is even more magnified in a certain way, like something, I mean, that's my belief. I think that there's different times and places for things, right? But it does feel like there's a way that, I mean, it seems like you're maybe, I don't know if that's what you are speaking to, because obviously it's a very individual choice. But you know, that we can actually use our power in a way that, like, I guess I would say is generative, and maybe that is different for each person, but it does seem like it helps when it's not just for self. It's not just like,
Yeah.
you know, and I mean, I would even question, right? Like even with the feminine lifestyle empowerment brand and this idea, and this is partly what this show is founded on, so it's great. The idea that if you're thin and you make six figures and you know, are obviously white, I mean, that's something that people can't choose or not choose, but, you know, like somehow if you get to a certain point, right, that you're going to be happy, or that's going to lead to this feeling of power, is also just a complete myth. Like that's actually not what, right? That's not, I mean, and we know that that's like sort of a dangling carrot out there.
Oh yeah, it keeps us on the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
It keeps us on the hamster wheel. And like you said so brilliantly in your bio, like you help these people addicted to personal development.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? Like it keeps us on the hamster wheel of like, if I just fix my money mindset and, you know, develop my willpower, do those meditations, then I'll have this thing and then I'll feel worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps us on a hamster wheel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so then we could say another definition of feminine power is, you know, helping women to source their own truths and their own needs, you know, their own, like, knowing themselves, right? And being able to source from within, and also doing things that create true and lasting joy for them, which is moment to, you know, which is more moment to moment. So even like some of these things, right, that there's this idea that I'm going to get this thing out there, or if I'm, you know, if I make six figures, versus like, you know, okay, I'm doing this work in the world that actually feels really good. I feel really good about how I'm, you know, I feel good when I'm working with people, you know, I'm able to care for myself. I'm like, you know, I mean, like, and even if you then are, of course, like there can be the desire to obviously have more money to be able to provide for oneself and feel like, you know, feel abundant. And yet in my, I mean, in my experience, I'm sure in your experience, I'm sure in most people's experience, if that's the goal and it's sort of like out there, it doesn't, I mean, one, I don't feel like there's any power in it if we're defining power. And I also feel like there's not much contentment even when you get there. It's like, oh, I got there and great, but the journey, you know, wasn't really that fulfilling.
And to tie it back to like body wisdom and embodiment, it's a really disembodied journey to have this cognitive, like, oh, I just want to reach six figures, because in my mind that's, and like we've been there, like we've been on that path of like, that's the goal, that's the thing that's going to make me feel good. And it's not actually attuning to what the body might be saying, which is like, hey, I actually need this to go a little bit slower because I'm just learning how to be with money right now. And it doesn't really feel safe in my system to like jump to multiple six figures in a month or a year. Or, you know, maybe I'm, you know, this is my certain niche, but if you're really attuned, like the niche is different because, you know, we often see people go into niches or pursuits because we have an understanding of what it will give us or bring us, right? So I'm thinking like the typical thing would be like, well, I'm going to be a business coach rather than like a psycho-spiritual coach because it's easier to make money basically, right? But if like your heart longing is to be like an animal psychic, right? And you're like but I'm not, how am I going to make any money at this? But there's this generative life force like guiding you towards what is true for you. And you can't measure that by making six figures.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I understand that there's some privilege in that perspective too, right? The whole like just follow your heart and follow your guidance. Like some people don't have that luxury actually to like take things slow, to break things down, to really do the thing that their heart is longing for. But some people do, and I think it's we're doing ourselves a disservice to like follow somebody else's dream or vision of who we need to be. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And a lot of times, like we're just presented with one option. Mm-hmm. You know, like I scan my roster of like, or my social media feeds of like coaches, and you know, there's AI algorithms that like impact who I see, but I see a lot of the same kind of options and same things and the same markers of success, six figures, fancy handbags, like vacations. And that might not be where my fulfillment lies. In fact, like personally, that's not.
Yeah, me neither.
Right? It's like really not. So I was in this hamster wheel of like, but that's success, unconsciously not even really wanting that. And then picking up the same stick to beat myself with, which is like, why can't I have the success and the thing that like I'm supposed to have and I've done all this work? And it's like, oh, my system's actually protecting me right now and guiding me towards something that's more true, more aligned with my power.
And I would say that that's that's one huge definition in my book of power and of feminine power is, you know, like being able to discern like what is actually true for me in my body, you know, and I think you're absolutely right with obviously the privilege piece of not always being able to move slow, but I think that being able to tune into the body, and feeling safe enough to do that, which, you know, I also know that it's important for, I have a dear friend who she creates like, she does movement spaces for all people of color so that they can feel safe to go into their bodies without having white people, you know, in the space. So like, as an example, I mean, I think that there's a lot of like, that's an example of like, right, like, yes, there is privilege in that, but then there's also, and she does fundraising and it's really great to donate to her so that these spaces can be, you know, offered to people who need them. But, you know, that's, I think, another example of like, because the body, when it feels safe, like then there's a lot of power, right, in going into the body and trusting the body, having the space to do so. So I mean, I'm just wanting to bring in like just the emphasis on the body, because I think there is obviously so much wisdom like you're speaking to.
Yeah, totally.
And then that's where the fulfillment, I mean, I think for like when we're listening to our truth, when we're listening to our bodies, like in my experience, that's when there's so much more, that's when I feel so much more power. I mean, I really feel a lot of power when I'm just owning what actually is true for me, even if I can't get the desire met, even like to fully be like, this is it. Like, this is how I feel. This is how I love. This is how I do life. Like, this is what works for me. Instead of sort of subtly looking at like, which is how I think we're trained, like, how am I, and especially as women, I mean, men have their own conditioning, but like, how am I supposed to be, you know? How am I supposed to be in this setting and in this setting? And
we're like highly attuned to notice that and to be sensitive to that, how I'm supposed to show up in this space. I think that's true for any marginalized group, is like your nervous system adapts to really like understand how to blend in and not ruffle feathers and not make waves. And by the way, I just wanted to reflect, like, I hear what you're saying in this claiming what's true for you. And I've really felt you doing that in the last year or so. which has been so beautiful to witness and watch.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, it feels like an ongoing process, but
isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it
Yeah. But it does. It feels like that's where I really feel that's where there's the most power for me. And that's where I feel the most, like, personally, and this is what I also do with women, but that's where that I work with. But I think that's where there's the most, it's like there's a coherence. And so, it's kind of owning that. I mean, I would be curious for you. I feel that in you as well. And I'm also really curious if you're open to speaking about how you've been using your page and kind of as a segue into that, right? Like from this conversation, that I'm guessing that you're trusting something that feels right for you, right? If we're talking about power. And so then you're expressing yourself in maybe some new ways than you maybe, or using your voice on your platform in a certain way. And just that experience for you.
Yeah, well, your question makes me want to circle back to what you said about the coherence of listening to the body, and like the correlation between like how safe we feel, the safety being paramount to being able to listen, basically. And then another aspect of, I think I would call it feminine power. I think I would. It might change, but I think an aspect of feminine power is also recognizing that there's a collective body that we exist in, that we're not just individual bodies, we're part of a collective body. And so when there's dysregulation or incoherence in any part of that collective body, everybody is impacted. Right? So Tada Hazumi talks a lot about this. He works in the framework of cultural somatics, but it's like looking at the body as a whole, the body of culture, the body of the whole. And for me, recognizing that these tools to feel like it shouldn't be a privilege to feel safe and to listen to your body. And these tools aren't tools that should be available to a very specific privileged group of people, right? Like embodiment tools, regulation tools, like this should be base information. This should be democratized. And I think, just circling back to that idea of feminine power, like recognizing that we're impacted by the whole, and then how does our work contribute to bringing coherence to that collective body, like bringing it out beyond just the individual, even if it's like, and I'm not saying that I am on the front lines, like I could be doing a lot more. So this isn't like a self-righteous perspective. And it's, I'm also not thinking like we need to come in and be social justice warriors or like, save anybody, because I think people all have their own agency and their own power. But the feminine like wants to bring coherence into the whole. So how, like bringing it back to how can we do that? And that really is what some of my work has been about lately, is like, how do we, bring awareness to the disparities within this collective body? How do we look at the incoherence that's existing within this body, right? In terms of like social movements, the wave of anti-racist education that's happened in the last few months. Like a lot of people don't want to look at that. And I know that I've lost, like just by posting stuff, like, again, I could be doing a lot more, but I'm just like posting things that I think are important for us to know. And I'm losing a lot of people in my spaces. And I'm getting messages that are like, stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. Or I don't agree with this, and when you post it, it feels toxic and oppressive, and you should know that. Right? Like projecting this emotion, like people having emotional responses and then projecting it onto me. So yeah, I feel like I went on a bit of a tangent there, but to like bring it back to my own, the emergence of my own power is like recognizing that there is such a thing as this global body, and how do we bring coherence into that and make it so that as a whole we start tuning in and listening. And for right now, for me, that looks like posting stuff that I think is educational and important for us to know. It also looks like having diversity in the summit that I run, like recognizing that there's a really big problem in the space of embodiment and trauma healing, which is that a lot of the information is coming from mostly old white men, right? And not knocking those experts or the complete value of that information, but does that represent the whole body of work? No. Is it complete? Is it coherent? That's actually not. There's an incoherence in that. So how do we bring more coherence into embodiment discourse, into our summits, right? So it was really important for me and my partner, Mani Christel, to have a really wide range of voices on the shadow side of the feminine summit, because we saw a big shadow in our first summit, which was like all the experts are white. There's like a lot of homogeneity in the summit. And then the second summit, we were like, okay, we have a lot to learn, and we have to look at why we were just looking at those people as the experts, and bring in a much broader range of voices and perspectives. And it actually like changed me as a person, that whole experience of hearing so many different perspectives, looking at my own lens and the blind spots in that lens, just recognizing the impact, actually, from talking to a lot of different speakers, recognizing the impact that the incoherence of whiteness or white body supremacy brings into a space, because it's real. Yeah, that really changed me. And it was interesting because Mani and I got pushback for that as well. Like, why? Not from a lot of people. And I want to include a trigger warning in this, because I know it can be difficult for people of color to hear this as well. But like, we had big names in the embodiment world reach out to us and say, that amount of diversity doesn't make sense. It's not representative. You're walking like, what you're doing is borderline dangerous. Be really careful. What you're doing is an aspect of the feminine shadow. Like,
how is that an aspect of the feminine shadow? That's what I'm trying to understand. But
the idea being, I guess, that within the political left, there is, and I don't actually totally disagree with like the broader vision that within the political left, like there's some shadow behavior, like there's some shadowy, like cancel culture, like, you know, there are some dynamics that I think we would do well to look at. But to say your DEI work is borderline dangerous was like just totally missing the mark completely. Saying like, you know, you think it's coming from a good place, but this whole movement is kind of dangerous.
But what are they saying is dangerous about it? I mean, this is just an aside that I'm curious about, because it seems like what you're actually doing is you're creating you're actually taking like the range of voices and not just having it be the people, let's say, I mean, it was the shadow side of the feminine. You're not only working with embodiment, right? But even if you were just working with embodiment, and let's say it's, you know, a lot of the embodiment work out there of like the big names or the people who've done like a great body of work, you know, are white. It seems like by including more diversity, you're actually including a lot of that's happening in the world, but not is in the forefront, right? And that then it also represents all the different perspectives, the different, you know,
totally,
bodies,
totally.
different, like, and that it actually brings in more of like a well-roundedness to the conversation. But
well, I think the idea was like the political left is dangerous. And when you get into DEI, diversity, inclusion, and equity work, you're like moving in that space of the political left, and that's radical and that's dangerous. So if that kind of makes sense, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me, but that's that person's logic.
That's the perspective. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so then I'm really curious, like, as a woman that has had, you know, who's been speaking out, as a white woman who's speaking out about, who's, you know, creating a summit that has a wide range of diversity, you know, speaking out about your politics or, you know, what the realities of white privilege, or, you know, how you, a number of other like social issues in the world. And then you're getting this kind of pushback. Like, I'm just kind of curious what that's been like for you overall.
It's been really activating in some ways, but it's also been really mobilizing. So it's been activating, and like the fire, you know, is sometimes turned on, and it's mobilizing in a good way. Sometimes it's yeah, it's been a good experience for my system to kind of build some tolerance and some resilience for that kind of pushback. Which I think is important if we're like really saying something that's important and valuable for us. Not everybody's going to agree. Not everybody's going to be able to hear what we have to say, but it's still so important that we say it.
Yeah. And then, you know, you were talking about kind of like the impact on the nervous system. And then, you know, it's also I think this also speaks to like having, even as a white person, right, having I mean, you can never understand what someone in a more marginalized group might experience, but also just the trauma that, you know, is happening in the culture, right? And how that is a collective, I would say, like in the collective nervous system.
Totally.
Seems like there is something about, you know, experiencing that and fielding that and seeing then what different groups of people experience like firsthand, because you're getting it, right? You're getting it towards you, but you're getting it also towards like, this is what it means to speak out about what you really believe in, or to take a stand.
Totally.
You know, to not fit. I mean, I want to go back to like I mean, this sort of goes back to like the white lifestyle, the lifestyle.
The feminine empowerment lifestyle brand. Thank you, Kelly Beals.
Yeah. It's so great because, I mean, it feels to me like it kind of comes back to that, right? That there's this idea of who you're supposed to be, or, you know, if you don't fit into the norm, then all of a sudden you are demonized. I mean, I know you've gotten some pretty harsh, you know, called dangerous or toxic, or
it hasn't been, and it hasn't even been that bad, you know. It's I know a lot of people a lot of people are stepping out of much bigger boxes, right? But for me, it's like really catalyzed something of like, oh, this actually is important for me. Another breadcrumb to how I want my feminine power to impact not just me, but like the world.
Yeah, and that's actually, I was thinking that when you said that, like, it's been activating and mobilizing, and obviously I love that it actually strengthens the collective nervous system, right? Because you're also taking you're taking the, you're being able to hold more in your nervous system so that you can take a stand and be a stand for things that are important for you and be an ally, and so then it, I mean, and it seems like that's actually where like white fragility is also born of, is like the nervous system is like, it's like not being able to actually open to, experiencing things that people of color actually have to experience, for example. Like they don't have a choice. We do. And so, but I love that you said the word mobilizing, and that, like, you can even use the pushback that you're getting, right, to strengthen the nervous system and also strengthen your power and be like, no, this is what it means for me to be powerful. And I'm not going to listen to you. I'm actually going to, that's going to give me even more fuel to, take this stand and to also reclaim what feminine power means. And then going back to what Kendra said, which I love, is that it means range, and it means it's not only, we could say by this definition, it's not only like the range in each individual body, but it's also the range of for the I don't know if I would say for the collective, but it's like, feels like there's something about the range of how one might be using their platform or their voice, right? It's so like, what are you choosing to focus on and talk about? And so it's not just, we often think of range, I think, as like more of an individual kind of like, I mean, that's how I often think about it. It's like, oh, what's the range of, like me expressing myself this way, and then being able to soften and but that, to me, I just got that it's like, it's actually making the range be what is talked about, what is tolerated, like what you say, how you use your platform. God. Yeah.
So. What is, I want to say what is acceptable or tolerated versus not, and not from like self-righteous place, but just like a boundaried place. Right? Oh, like, we don't tolerate that doesn't serve the collective body. Or we do serve this because it serves the collective. It's like a greater ability to, like, more coherence in the collective to realize what's truly serving that collective body.
Yeah. I love that. It's really a great place that I think we got to with it in this conversation too. I think this is a good place to end, and we're almost at the end of the hour. So thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation, and I'm just really appreciating also bringing feminine power into not only like kind of like allowing, like having range in this kind of individual way, but also this more collective way. And how are we using that, how that feminine power is really being all of who we are, and being able to also impact, impact the world in the ways that we want it to. And being able to use, I think also being able to use even use the experiences that are challenging and jar the nervous system to actually even take more of a stand. So,
yeah, totally. I love where we went in this conversation, Lori. Thanks so much for your questions. And it was good to go to some of these places. I have to admit, a lot of these spaces within myself are quite new, actually. So there's like still a lot of organization happening, but it feels good to chat and parse apart some ideas and clarity.
Yay. Good. Yeah. Yeah, it's really good for me too. Yeah. There's spaces that I definitely obviously can grow more and more and more. And in using myself, in the same way, to speak out to what I believe in. So, Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would love for you to share with people how they can follow you, and also, what programs you have going on and how to work with you.
Yeah, totally. So Blaire Lindsay, that's all my handles, Lindsay with an A. At the moment, I have a couple of ways to work, the clients work with me. I have an upcoming somatic erotic educator certification training with my co-host from the summit, Mani Cristal. That starts in January, and I'm really excited for that program. It's a 3-month program. I do a monthly exploration into shadow work with Mani as well. It's called Sanctuary. So that's a monthly way to drop into the work and connect to embodiment, shadow work, looking at the deeper protection mechanisms and masks. I work one-on-one with clients, so that's really high touch, container for trauma resolution, for work on sensuality, ultimately to do exactly what we're talking about here, is like refining that inner compass and catalyzing the life force in service of what's really true. Yeah.
Cool.
And the legacy that person is here to build. And I think that's kind of it. Yeah.
Cool. Beautiful. Yeah, I would really highly suggest, if there's a way, I can't now remember what you said about watching some of the interviews. You can pay for like the whole chunk of interviews, right? That's how it goes.
Yeah. The summit's for purchase. I believe it's linked in my Facebook page. I have to double check. I can also leave a comment below, but the summit is a collection of over 100 interviews on the feminine shadow with experts and voices from a very wide range of perspectives. It's really a phenomenal body of work, like an encyclopedic body of work on the feminine. So if you're working with the feminine or the shadow, you're interested in Jungian psychology, you're interested in the shadow at all, like definitely check that out.
Great. Yeah. And it sounds like also you're kind of, we should end actually, because we're basically at an hour, but I was going to say, it sounds like your subscription, being able to work with you and you and Mani is also a good way of really getting, being more introduced to your work and also introduced to that body of work. So that's always like a very easy way for people to do that. So I would highly recommend that. And yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. And thank you so much, Blaire. It's been a pleasure. Okay.
Yeah, thank
you. Everyone next week.